Hello, I am Jaakko Erkinaro from the Natural Resources Institute Finland, and I'm going to tell you something about the recent development in pink salmon distribution and abundance in the northernmost Atlantic area. A little bit of a history. Pink salmon was introduced in the Atlantic area in 1950s. The Russians transport the fish from the Russian Far East to the Kola Peninsula or in White Sea area. The idea was to establish self-sustaining populations, but that didn't really work until mid-80s when they changed the donor stock to a northern source, which seemed to be a bit better adapted to the northern conditions in the Kola Peninsula White Sea area. And that's when the natural reproduction started. The audio stocks have been successfully introduced, and the even year population, despite some attempts, has been very weak so far. According to the reports, the stocking was ceased in 2001, and thereafter all the returns of pink salmon in the Atlantic area should be from natural production. There's been some natural reproduction of pink salmon in the north and northeast of Norway, in some of the rivers close to the Russian border. For some time, it's been fairly small scale, some spawning in certain rivers, but in 2017 there was a sudden expansion and increase in abundance and distribution of pink salmon, both in Norway and elsewhere in the North Atlantic area. Pink salmon was suddenly found in Central Europe, in France, Germany, Denmark, England, Ireland, Scotland, eastern part of Canada, different parts of Greenland and Iceland, and that was first time ever in some areas. All of a sudden, it just happened to be everywhere in the North Atlantic area. 2019, it was fairly similar to 2017. There were some differences, less pink salmon in the south, but actually more pink salmon in the north. And in 2021, there was a huge increase. In the northern areas, it was estimated to be a tenfold increase in abundance compared to 2019. That was the first record of pink salmon in the Baltic Sea. There were new areas in Greenland and Canada where pink salmon were recorded. So 2021 was something very, very special. Here are some maps of Norway, and you can see the odd years 2015, 2017 and 2019 and see the huge increase in distribution and abundance over those years. 21 is missing from the map, and that would have been very, very dark red, large dots in the north because of this tenfold increase. Looking at the northernmost part, in particular the Barents Sea, White Sea area, there were some examples. Norway estimated some 150,000 pink salmon captured in rivers and coasts in the country, and out of those, Finnmark, the northernmost part of Norway, there were estimated some 70,000 pink salmon removed from various rivers in that area. And looking at the easternmost part of northern Norway, the Varangefjord rivers, in many rivers 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 pink salmon were removed per river, and some of these rivers are very small, so it really gives a kind of a scale of what has happened. The Tenotana River, forming the border between northernmost Finland and Norway, we recorded some 50,000 pink salmon entering the river using a sonar in the lowermost part of the main stem. In Russia, the estimated nominal catch was 600 metric tons of pink salmon in 2021, and in Varzuga River only 300 tons of pink salmon were captured. There's been a steady increase in the catches of pink salmon in the Murmansk region in Russia, starting probably in 2011, and then the 2021 was really the highest catch recorded. Looking at the Varzuga River a bit closer, they have this commercial trap operational for Atlantic salmon and pink salmon that's been there for decades, and because of some quotas it was operational only over 2 weeks in July in 2021, and 300 tons of pink salmon were caught, which is somewhat close to 200,000 individuals. And based on these figures, it was estimated that probably somewhere between 500,000 to 1 million pink salmon actually entered the Varzuga River last year. Looking at the river Tenor a bit closer, the river Tenor or Tana or Teatnu, depending on the language out of these three languages used in the area, it is a fairly large border river system between Norway and Finland up in the north on the 70 northern latitude. It is supporting close to 30 genetically distinct Atlantic salmon populations in different parts of the system and in different tributaries. It has produced very large catches of Atlantic salmon, up to 250 metric tons. There's a decline at the moment in the populations and the population status. In this river system, monitoring programs date back to 1970s. We have collected fairly detailed catches and catch samples and different types of statistics from early 1970s onwards. We have surveyed juvenile Atlantic salmon densities at permanent sampling sites since late 70s. And then there is video monitoring, snorkeling counts and sonar counts of ascending or spawning salmon in the system. So this is forming a fairly good basis also for following the development in pink salmon distribution and abundance in different parts of the system. Last year, we operated 4 different sonars in the system. The mainstem sonar is on the map on the upper right corner, and then in different tributaries, 2 video monitoring sites in tributaries, and we conducted snorkeling counts of spawning salmon in 3 different tributaries. So this is a fairly good basis for data collection. Pink salmon in the Tenor River, there were first observations in early 1960s, some varying catches depending on the stocking intensity in northwest Russia. Some records of this system might be underestimates because of difficulties of inexperienced fishermen to actually recognize the silvery fish from silvery once winter salmon or sea trout, which look fairly similar as you can see from the pictures. But there have been some quite large catches recorded at times, as I said, depending on the stocking intensity in Russia. Fairly low catches in 1980s, but then again a bit higher catches in 90s and 2000s. Looking at the catch estimates on the upper left-hand corner, there were some fairly high catches in 1970s, some lower catches afterwards, and then 2017 you can see this highest ever recorded by that time. Looking at the estimated numbers of pink salmon actually entering the Tenor River on the lower right corner, pre-2017, in those years we have estimated maybe some hundreds in most years entering the river, but in 2017 we estimated 5,000, same level 2019, and a tenfold increase in 2021 up to 50,000 pink salmon entering the river. And the two last bars are based on sonar data. Looking at the tributaries and the distribution of pink salmon in the different parts of the system, you can see the red dots, which are indicating records of pink salmon all the way to the uppermost large headwater tributaries, but also in the lowermost tributaries. Those gray dots are interesting because those are Atlantic salmon spawning rivers, but smaller tributaries, and in those tributaries we have not seen pink salmon. It seems like pink salmon is concentrated in the main stem and in larger tributaries, and so far they have not really entered the smaller tributaries. But of course the question is that what the future will bring if the abundances are getting higher. We have conducted some other studies on pink salmon now that this is a new phenomenon in the system, these high abundances of spawning pink salmon. We have collected environmental DNA 2019-2021 and developed the methodology together with our Norwegian colleagues and looked at the occurrence and distribution of pink salmon in the system compared with other records. And we will do that this year too, although this is an even year and we are not expecting large quantities of pink salmon, but this is going to be an interesting comparison in the development of the method. We have done some radio telemetry, some mapping of the spawning areas and looked into the characteristics of the spawning areas, which are at least in the main stem very shallow, very close to the shoreline. We looked into the egg and alevin development last fall when we saw first time ever these big spawning aggregations of pink salmon. It was very early egg development. The fish spawned already in maybe late July, early August. That was the start of the spawning season, and the egg development was very, very quick. We have continued this juvenile service this year in 2022 by electrofishing and digging the redds in spawning areas, and also we've been beach seining in the estuary to see whether we can see the migrating smolts. This is a little footage from last year in the spawning areas, and you can see these vicious females, very, very aggressive, hitting the divers, which are not very small guys, and also the GoPro video camera. And these vicious females are hitting, and the males seem to be fairly cool in this footage. Here we recorded the egg development last fall in pretty harsh conditions, and already in October we saw these emerged alevins in icy cold water. And here is a series of development, non-eyed eggs in August, eyed eggs in September, emerged alevins in October, larger alevins in November, and migration ready smolts in May 2022. This is from this year, April and May. On the left hand side you can see the spawning areas, and we did some electrofishing and collected the juveniles from the gravel. And on the right hand side, this is the very wide estuary of the Teno River, and we did some beach seining in this small seine, and yet we were able to catch quite a few pink salmon. Obviously these are not quantitative estimates, we are not able to look into survival rates or anything like that, but at least we got some first feeling and handle on that the spawning was successful overall, and there were smolts entering the Barents Sea for sure. What is the big picture in the northernmost Atlantic area? How is the future going to be? There are two major, I would say, superpowers of pink salmon in the north. One is Norway with hundreds of salmon rivers along the coast, and one is obviously Russia, where the species was first introduced, and there's lots of rivers in that area as well. In Norway, pink salmon is considered a harmful alien species, and there is a very strong determination to fight the species, eradicate it, or at least reduce their abundance very strongly as possible. There's this action plan against pink salmon underway in Norway. Meanwhile, in Russia, there is no such determination for eradication or anything like that, and pink salmon is considered a resource, and there's much more interest in harvesting the species than getting rid of it. So the question is that two very different approaches from these two countries. So what will the future be? In Norway, there is lots of experience in massive removals of pink salmon, especially from the northern rivers in 2017, 2019, 2021. And in Russia, there is a fairly long experience in the mutual life of pink salmon and Atlantic salmon in the same rivers. How is that mutual life been? Are there some impacts of pink salmon on the Atlantic salmon populations and so forth? Unfortunately, there's very little published information about either of these two very important topics, where many countries and many areas would be very interested in. Are these massive removals working? Do the pink salmon return to the same rivers? How is the home river fidelity of pink salmon? And especially, what kind of effects pink salmon increase would have on Atlantic salmon populations? Finland is in the middle of these two pink salmon superpowers, and we don't have even Atlantic coastline, and we are just trying to monitor the two border rivers that we are sharing with Norway. So we have very little to say in this area, but we collect information at least. Just a couple of words for summary and conclusions. We have seen this very rapid and dramatic increase in pink salmon distribution and abundance in the North Atlantic area, especially in the north since 2017. There was a tenfold increase of abundance in the northernmost areas between 2019 and 21. And then, of course, the big question is, what about 2023? What are we going to see next year and beyond? Is it going to be another tenfold increase in abundance? Is it going to level off to the same levels as 21? Is it going to crash? We don't know. That is going to be interesting to see how the future will be. Then there are, of course, the questions about management, how different countries are going to be reacting, what kind of measures are going to take place. It would be very important to analyze the information from the mass removals and look into the impacts on Atlantic salmon and other biota, other species in these low nutrient, low species diversity northern rivers. We have so far too little information, I would say, and it would be very, very important to combine and collect all that and put that together. We need to exchange experiences, we need to compile information, we need to share data between countries and conduct joint research in the North Atlantic area in this new situation. Finally, I'm obviously not alone here, and I will thank my colleagues both in Finland and Norway and Russia for putting this presentation together and providing some elements for it. Thank you very much.